Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and well, this is it. Now, I thought that I was done talking about Liz Truss these last couple of weeks because, for those who didn't know, I took it upon myself to rent a copy of Liz Truss's political memoir and basically transcribe it in the form of an audiobook for YouTube, which you can read absolutely for free. Or rather listen to, I should say. And, well, curiously enough, it was the very first political memoir I've actually ever read in my life. If for no other reason, then it can only get better from here, because it's possibly one of the absolute dumbest... It is... The book itself is like... I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about it, because you know what's really baffling? As I was reading through it, from when she was Justice Secretary to it was either Environment or International. Every single chapter I read, Liz Truss was making herself look more and more stupid. Liz Truss is under the... Well, then again, I suppose it's 10 Years to Save the West is not really meant to be a book for the British public. It's more for the Ronald Reagan, Bob Lightser, Donald Trump sort of American. And I say American for that reason, because it doesn't really read as though she's in favour for what's going on in Britain. It's more for an American audience. However, as I have discussed before, Liz Truss's audience in America is dwindling as well. So let's finally put a nail in the coffin here and basically just explore how Liz Truss's reputation has just gone down the pan ever since the book has been revealed. Now, there are several points of notice I want to talk about this, not only with the book, but also her time as Prime Minister. And by the way, it's not just from things like Times Radio or LBC, but there's also going to be things like I think it's either the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post have done videos about Liz Truss as well. And you're going to be very, very surprised when you hear what they say, because, well, let's get into it.
The whole thing is riddled with...
I mean, yeah, the whole thing is riddled with controversies, bullshit, and just... a semblance of a lack of tact is the words I'm going to use. So let's get started.
The whole thing is riddled with contradictions. She wants more spending, but then she says too many people are addicted to spending. She says the Queen told her, pace yourself. She says, maybe I should have done. And then literally on the next page is saying, why would I have slowed down? What would I have gained from that? It is absolutely potty.
Happy Liz Truss today to everyone who celebrates. Her book is out. She spoke to The Sun's Harry Cole about 10 years to save the West for his show Never Mind the Ballots. She hasn't lost her desire to shake things up. She wants to sack the Governor of the Bank of England, get rid of the OBR and also leave the European Court of Human Rights.
We've got to leave the ECHR, abolish the Supreme Court and abolish the Human Rights Act.
So to strip it back out.
Yeah. So
the British Bill of Rights? I think the Tories tried to do that for 3 or 4 times in the last.
I prefer the traditional Bill of Rights that is always. I mean, Britons have been free.
You mean the bill? You mean the Bill of Rights that is only really applicable to U.S. jurisdiction, U.S. democracy? Again, Liz Truss, she does realise that America the United States of America is very, very different to the United Kingdom, right? And that's... I don't think Liz Truss can even see the difference. Because that's, again, like I said, oh God, oh God, it's giving me a headache. I cannot believe just the temerity of this woman. I really cannot.
For many, many years, the idea that human rights were only invented in 1997 is a Blair fiction. All that he's invented is rights for people that shouldn't be in our country.
Harry asked her if she wanted to return to frontline politics.
I don't really want to commit to anything at this stage. What I'm focused on is talking about I think I have got quite a unique perspective, having spent 10 years in government, having got right to the top, having had numerous battles in 6 different departments. And I want to...
Oh, yes, battles. Okay, how about the fact that Liz Truss did not condemn the Daily Mail for calling judges the enemies of the people? This is despite the fact that Liz Truss, during said period in 2017, was the Justice Secretary, and she was willing to stand by... oh, God, you know... Has nobody ever showcased to Liz Truss the unwritten British Constitution? I feel like somebody ought to, because I generally am now under the impression that Liz Truss is trying to contradict British society as well. She's trying to say that we don't need this because of this context, but we also need it for this context. She's acting as though you could just sort of sometimes apply certain things into different scenarios, and that is... I'm surprised. She compares herself to Brian Clough, of all people, by the time she concludes her time in Downing Street. That's just how completely cuckoo this woman is. That's just an insult to Brian Clough. And also, there's no mentions of any, lettuces or anything like that, which is ironic because she is literally the butt of the jokes of British politics. I wish that was not true, but it is, and actually I'm kind of glad that it is.
Want to use that learning?
Now, Times Radio's Matt Chorley has reviewed Liz Truss's recollection of her time as Prime Minister for the Times. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to recollect, would it?
No.
Because it wasn't very long, Matt Chorley.
True.
It is an astonishing work of literature. I don't think I've ever read anything like it.
That's a good quote for the back.
Even the people she's got quotes for is mad. So it's like Boris Johnson, Gary Kasparov, the former the world's chess player, various sort of slightly out there newspaper columnists. And they're all a bit like her or loathe her. She asked some interesting questions. Even they're a bit caveated. They're the quotes on the book.
Goodness me. Did you learn anything new from this book? Did anything kind of, I don't know.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I learned about it, is that Liz Truss doesn't apologise. She either knows or pretends that she doesn't know what the hell she did. And she doesn't really seem fazed about it either. And it's actually kind of scary when you even hear Liz Truss talk earlier, in that she doesn't look... There's not a semblance of guilt, emotion, anything like that whatsoever. And it's very hard to feel things for people who don't feel anything. And that's kind of why I'm not particularly bad about criticizing or calling out Liz Truss, because, harassment, criticism is not harassment, as they say. Something that I feel like Liz Truss is going to say is not true, but then she'll do it anyway.
I'll focus on one thing that I do agree with her about.
Okay.
She talks about the lack of support for prime ministers in Downing Street. And
Is this about Ocado?
yeah, well, she couldn't get a Ocado delivery in. When she was ill, a diary secretary had to go to the doctors. The fact that when Boris Johnson was ill, there wasn't a sort of medical support. She was booking her own hair appointments and all that. However, this is from someone who thinks we need a smaller state. She complains that MPs are addicted to public spending. I think there is a good case for saying that the way that we treat our prime ministers, put them in a pokey flat, which is infested with fleas and all that, isn't very good. She rightly draws a comparison to US presidents who have doctors on standby and caterers and chefs and all of that. However, that she's not advocating any of that. I mean, actually, the weird thing that she's actually advocating is almost, you might say, a deeper state. But that isn't really what she's advocating at all. The whole thing is riddled with contradictions. She wants more spending, but then she says too many people are addicted to spending. She says the Queen told her, pace yourself. She says, maybe I should have done. And then literally on the next page is saying, why would I have slowed down? What would I have gained from that? It is absolutely potty. Put that on the front cover.
we will do. What about the kind of personalities in there? I don't know, Kwasi Kwarteng, Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, etc.
Oh, it's all their fault. Everything.
Right.
Absolutely everything is somebody else's fault. It's either an acronym. She doesn't like acronyms, so it's the BBC, the IMF. I don't know, MFI,
the BOE,
probably.
the ECHR.
I mean, any number of those
OBR.
people. S Club 7, probably.
That's right, though.
Yeah.
I can agree on that one.
Michael Gove, she accuses other people of leaking. Now, I'm not going to give away state secrets here, although she's quite happy to lift the lid on her conversations with the late Queen.
True.
I don't think it's impossible to imagine a scenario in which people around Liz Truss would have sometimes leaked things to papers in order to further their career. The lack of self-reflection is, like in any person, is extraordinary.
Is anything her fault?
No,
No, there
There
isn't.
must be something.
no.
Are there
at
any
one
admissions?
No, no. That's exactly the point. That's why people don't listen to Liz Truss. It's everything. It's because other people were getting in her way. She had the best intentions in the world, but nobody saw through them. And by the way, that's not from me. That was the Daily Telegraph reviewing this book. Even the Daily Telegraph don't blame Liz Truss by saying that what she did was her fault. It was everybody else's fault. I know this is going to sound like, again, I'm like flogging a dead horse at this point, but why? Who? I know, it's no wonder Liz Truss wasn't elected by the public to become Prime Minister, because she would have been blown out of the water. Because if in the words of the famous song, the public wants what the public gets, and well, are you trying to tell me that is if there was an election held in 2022 following the fallout of Johnson and Chris Pincher and the rest of the government, would you actually vote for Liz Truss? Honestly, I would have done my homework and I would have absolutely have said no before, but I just wanted people to know with a bit more concreteness as to why I would have said no. So with that being said, let's continue. And yes, I am, but however, I am going to say self-reflection, it's very, very important, and it's something that a lot of people, not just in politics, need to sort of understand, because it makes you look more mature when you stand by when you admit your mistakes and say that you want to do better. There's no humiliation in that, but it only exists it only works if you believe yourself that you've done wrong. And well, Liz Truss is, well, she's not one of those people.
Concessions.
She concedes that they had a lack of experts who supported their plan, who could go out and broadcast.
Right.
When they were doing it, as we found, we were constantly, she was the newly elected leader of the Conservative Party, new Prime Minister. Every day it was very easy to get people to come on and say what she was doing was the wrong thing to do. It was really hard, it wasn't the lack of trying, to get people to come on Times Radio and say it was the right thing to do. And what she can't quite make the leap to is maybe the lack of experts was because people who knew what they were talking about thought it wasn't the right thing to do. And even the people who...
Yeah, by the way, this is also something that Liz Truss conveniently leaves out when talking about the Bank of England. That they were constantly against her from having bonds being sold at prices that would have made the pound drop to its lowest position since what I believe the date was at least 1985. But it probably might have been a little bit more earlier than that still. But that's the thing as well, is that Liz Truss is on an island she created herself, that isn't big enough to hold anybody else, because she is what you might like to call the minority of one. And she is the only person who believes this, and, well, when you're the Prime Minister and you're the only one who believes it, it's not a good look.
Who did support what she was doing, actually moved away from... Gerard Lyons,
yes.
Mark Littlewood, we've got coming on later on. Those people who did support at the beginning even they went a bit quiet come the end.
Well, we could see Gerald Lyons moving away.
Backing
in
away.
real time.
We had
Homer Simpson disappearing at the head.
He's quite an interesting economist, and then we always say, and he advised Liz Truss, and almost the first thing he says to us is, well, I didn't advise her that closely.
Yeah.
And I didn't see her when she was in Downing Street.
How serious do you think she is about Act 2, the return?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how serious she is about it. There is literally no way that Liz Truss is going to become leader of the Conservative Party again. There is, let's not forget, she talks about it.
So 21,000 votes more than Rishi Sunak last time around. Do you think all those people...
Yeah, and by the time she went, I think off the top of my head, 75% of Tory members thought she should resign.
It depends, though, who the other choices are, as we've seen, doesn't it?
But she wouldn't get on the ballot. She got on the ballot through Tory members. I will literally eat a lettuce.
Oh, come on.
I will eat...
What kind
what
of
do you want me to
lettuce?
eat? Well,
You have to eat your hat.
It is... I will eat a hat. I will wear a lettuce as a hat.
Lettuce covered in arsenic.
Fine.
An arsenic lettuce.
And I think, actually, the thing that I think she's found surprising during her... Actually, the clips that you just played were a bit unfair, really, because they made it sound like she was a serious figure being asked serious questions. Actually, I think the thing she's found is she's gone around doing all of the interviews, weirdly not on Times Radio. For some reason, she doesn't want to speak to me, it's extraordinary. Is how unseriously anyone is taking it. You know, when you've got Chris Mason on the 10 o'clock news saying a normal person, humiliated the way she was, might have gone and run a B&B in Crete. Yeah. And he asked her, isn't it humiliating? She said, I wouldn't say humiliating. It is humiliating. Right. She became Prime Minister. She's
doubling down,
Everyone told her, if you do this and do unfunded tax cuts, you'll crash the economy and it won't work. And it's not that people blew her up. She did what she said she was going to do, and everything that everyone said was going to happen, happened.
Oh.
Jesus Christ. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're not done yet, because that's just part of it. And now what we're going to do is that we're actually going to take a look into LBC. Because you may be saying, on one point of view, is that that's pretty damning on its own. You think it's pretty bad, and yes, it is. It's anybody else who got a memoir, a book, or their entire chronology of not only their time in politics but their time in Downing Street, when it was sort of like almost brought to a head in just a short amount of time as that's pretty embarrassing for... if it happened to me, I almost wouldn't even show my face in broad daylight ever again after seeing stuff like that. However, and yet one thing again I have to really demonstrate just how far this goes is that it goes beyond commentators on Times Radio or even my opinions. It covers a lot of people. So what we're going to do next is go to James O'Brien from LBC. So the unhinged publicity tour, as they call this. So here we go.
Got quite a good unhinged headline for you today. It's a double whammy. It's an unhinged headline, and then it's got a very clever comment from the history guy Dan Snow. I'm not just calling him the history guy, like a history guy, like I'd be the Brexit guy. That's what he calls himself. He is known as the history guy. He's a brilliant bloke, Dan. So I'll do the unhinged headline first. Okay, let's do it.
Unhinged headline.
Exclusive. Liz Truss says the power exercised in Britain by unelected people is a scandal. She's given an interview to a columnist at the Daily Telegraph called Alison Pearson. This is, if you're a fan of the original Ghostbusters, this is like the streams crossing, potentially. I don't know that this should have been allowed to happen, that these two particular streams should have been permitted to cross. But cross they have. And Liz Truss has shared this gem. The power exercised in Britain by unelected people is a scandal. To which Dan Snow, the history guy, has responded by saying, very winningly, she was appointed by a hereditary monarch without recourse to a general election.
Yep.
This is the thing that I'm finding quite fascinating about Liz Truss.
Is that, again, it's what I've even said about Liz Truss, is that they are... Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, they are fantastic at saying very long, very wordy things, but they don't actually say anything whatsoever. Because what they don't seem to understand is that nobody is picking apart any of the values of anything they say, because, as it turns out, people can see through them and there is no value to them whatsoever. I mean, Liz Truss calling it unelected a scam, a scandal, and people saying that, of course, Liz Truss was not close to a general election. I don't really know. That's the thing as well you're going to notice, is that when people who have, like, no leg to stand on whatsoever, they will say whatever the hell they like anyway, because fuck it, who cares? They will... They got to know that what they do does not make them look good. I don't believe that these people are as stupid as they look. But sometimes I'm beginning to think that maybe no, it's because they have no foresight as to how the things make them look. And I know, again, this is something that, again, it could just come about in daily life, not just in politics, but just take a moment to at least think about what you're doing. You need to think before you actually speak. You learn this stuff all the way back when you're like 10 years old. It's probably even younger than that. I'd say 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds would probably have a better grasp of this sort of information and knowledge than Liz Truss.
Got a book out, by the way. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's as if she operates in a universe where she's never come across Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's to be you can be a bit detached from reality, and you can be a little bit delusional. I mean, look, Brexit is the ultimate in political delusion, continuing to pretend that it isn't failing to deliver any of the things that people were promised it would deliver, regardless of whether or not you want to pretend that you like.
That's a good point as well. Actually, by the time, I know we're in election season right now, but it'll be interesting to hear whenever Brexit does get mentioned, and, well, what do people have got to say about that? Because I've never been convinced, never am going to be convinced, and I feel like, again, by the time my days have come to an end, we'll be looking back on and saying that, what the hell were we thinking? Bear in mind, I voted to remain anyway, so, you know, you can't go around blaming me. That's not my problem.
Like spending more money for food and not being able to move to Spain anymore, or whatever it might be, or you know... She seems to operate in this mad space where she doesn't know anything she's done. I was trying to make sense of it last night, and this is the best I can do. It's as if she's in one of those Hollywood films where they have the same date every day. Like the woman, Jennifer Aniston, wakes up and she can't remember anything, so Ben Stiller has to woo her anew every day. That's not an actual film, but it nearly was. Do you see what I mean? So Liz Truss says things that seem to display a complete ignorance of anything Liz Truss has ever done. And that's the best example of today. The power exercised in Britain by unelected people is a scandal, says a woman appointed by a hereditary monarch without recourse to a general election. How do you do that? How do you do that? How can you go, yes, power exercised, unelected, and not realise that you were unelected, essentially, certainly on a national level, and that a hereditary monarch, also unelected, kind of nodded you through. Anyway, 10:53 is the time. I'm tempted to ask what they've been smoking, but that would be inappropriate.
Yeah, well, what do you expect? I'm actually going to save this one for later, because I did know that John Curtis, he was even on Liz Truss's Crackers doesn't go far enough. Liz Truss's addresses to America. I covered that before, and I feel like I'm gonna cover that again anyway. So, the one about John Curtis is something I probably actually want to put out there as well. But by the way, I love the fact that O'Brien was going about saying all of this, and something that is fantastic in every sense of the word. She just sort of, where on earth do you go? People are like losing their minds because Liz Truss stands there and look at that right there, holding the book upside down, and when she's trying to actually display it, that's that is what we have to work. That was what she was trying to work with, and well, that there is also this just Liz Truss being completely mental.
We have never had it so good.
This is so awkward.
I, conference, rebelled. I saw them having wasted. We are growing wheat more competitively than the Canadian prairies.
We Liberal Democrats believe in opportunity for all.
We coordinated international allies to call out Ukraine. To call out Russia.
And we are selling tea to China. Yorkshire tea.
Well, there haven't been as many starter homes as we would have liked.
Can I just say also as well at this point, again, I know you probably haven't read the book. I unfortunately have, so I'm jealous of you guys at this point. Liz Truss at every single turn is calling out that China, Russia, and Iran are the actual enemies of the world. And, well, why is Liz Truss over the moon about actually, doing business with China at all? Good question.
Tea.
Well, there haven't been as many starter homes as we would have liked.
How many did you build?
I don't have the exact numbers for you.
Well, it's easy to remember. It's 0. You built none.
We import 2/3 of all of our apples. We import 9/10 of all of our pears. We import 2/3 of our cheese.
And?
That is a disgrace.
I was at HMP Pentonville last week. They've now got patrol dogs who are barking, which helps deter drones. So we're using all kinds of solutions to
oh god, I'm pretty sure this is meant to be Quasi, but he looks bored. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's just bored, because it gets tiring after a while having to listen to this windbag puff in and out with her bullshit, because I'd be bored as well.
deal with.
Well, they are wrong.
We need to put our money where our mouth is.
The ozone layer is now getting better.
There was a lot of support for the report.
From whom?
From a number of people. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Cornish sardines, of
I'll give you a clue. It's 0.
Herefordshire pears, of Norfolk turkey, of Melton Mowbray pork pies, and of course, of black pudding. We're expecting the first refugees to arrive next week in the United Kingdom. I don't know exactly how they will get to the United Kingdom, but I know that we expect that they will certainly be arriving next week. Phasing out their use.
Where's Boris Johnson? Oh, wait, are we on telly?
Yeah. Boris is back at number 10 Downing Street.
Do me a favour, when you become Prime Minister, evict them.
He will have to move out at that point, that is true.
In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets.
I've sometimes been excessively over-enthusiastic, and sometimes I have to rein myself in.
Good lord. It's like, how on earth, like, okay, well, you know what, let's just put let's just put a little bow on this and actually conclude it in the only way that I think is going to be extremely surprising to a lot of you, and it's going to be this. So for what some of you guys may not know is that we've talked about how political commentators, new reporters who have ripped the book to shreds, to people calling Liz Truss completely and utterly unhinged. The fact that Liz Truss doesn't really seem to know anything about what she's talking about, and she seems like she's just going to do this again and again and again. And you've heard a lot bit about how I've actually talked about how Liz Truss has no authority whatsoever to start parading about like she knows what she's doing either. And finally, we're going to put a little bow on this because despite the fact that 10 Years to Save the West was more intended for an American audience, again, for the Ronald Reagan, the Donald Trump, the Bob Lightser sort of audience, the sort of American, I should say, we're going to take a look at a timeline of Liz Truss's 45 days as UK Prime Minister by the Wall Street Journal. You're going to hear about how even the Americans are not particularly enthusiastic or impressed about Liz Truss. So, go right ahead.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
Liz Truss resigned after just 45 days in power, becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister of the UK by quite a margin. Her plans to cut taxes...
Well, it's not... I don't think it's like quite a margin. I'm pretty sure Lord Douglas Hume, who was the Prime Minister when Kennedy was assassinated, lasted only I think it was either 2 or 3 days longer than Liz Truss. I'm not entirely sure why Douglas Hume had to resign. I'm not entirely sure, but it's either between Truss or Douglas Hume.
Roiled financial markets and left her with the lowest approval rating for a British leader in decades.
We have taken decisive action.
They crashed the economy. Working.
Here's how her 6 weeks in power unfolded, and the reasons why...
Okay, sorry. This is Liz Truss's husband, Hugh. I thought it was David Cameron for 1 second, so Liz Truss really was opening pork markets. Poor, because he fucked a pig, that's why.
Her premiership came crashing down so quickly. It all started when Liz Truss won the leadership contest, beating out other candidates, including former UK Treasury Chief Rishi Sunak.
Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
When she won the contest, she strode onto the stage, brimming with confidence. It would go on to mark the high point of her tenure. Days later, she got her first shock, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the country's longest-serving and much-beloved monarch.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built.
Miss Truss made a moving speech at the Queen's funeral, days before she set about installing her agenda and delivering her promises from the elect leadership campaign.
I have 3 priorities for our economy: growth, growth, and growth.
And it's also when her political problems began. Miss Truss and her finance minister, Kwasi Kwarteng, unveiled a far-reaching series of economic reforms.
I can announce today that we will cut the basic rate of income tax to 19 pence in April 2023, 1 year early.
Within minutes of Mr. Kwarteng's presentation, the markets responded. The pound began dropping, and yields on UK government debt began to soar, making the cost of borrowing for the government much more expensive. The plan soon drew criticism from some unusual quarters, including the IMF, which criticized its fiscal stimulus at a time when the Bank of England was trying to raise interest rates to stop inflation. It also drew criticism from U.S. President Joe Biden.
Well, it's predictable. I mean, I wasn't the only one that thought it was a mistake.
As the financial backlash deepened against the...
By the way, it should be mentioned as well as that Liz Truss made mention of this and thought that Bidenomics was completely ridiculous in principle because she had to make mention of the fact that Joe Biden made this announcement in a ice cream parlor in Oregon, of all places. I don't know whether Liz Truss has problems against people from Oregon, but, well, we could just add that to the list of things that, knowing Liz Truss, they're probably true. Maybe they grow lettuces in Oregon as well. I don't know.
The plan, and ordinary Britons were worried about higher mortgage payments on their houses.
Get out of office!
It seemed the political pressure was growing and the mood darkening. King Charles seemed to sum it up.
Your Majesty, sweet to see you again. Oh, it's a great pleasure.
Anyway.
Oh, God.
In the days that followed, things started to unravel quickly. Truss basically fired her chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, who was an old ally, and replaced him with Jeremy Hunt. Within a day, he began paring back her initial ideas with a series of U-turns on the tax cuts.
At a time when markets are rightly demanding commitment to sustainable public finances, it is not right to borrow to fund this tax cut.
Within 3 days, her package had been nearly entirely eviscerated.
Is this your last Prime Minister's questions?
Miss Truss, who is seen as headstrong, was not about to quit. Even as the chaos grew, she turned up to Parliament and vowed to fight on.
I am a fighter and not a quitter.
For Britons, Miss Truss will be remembered as Liz the Brief, the shortest-serving Prime Minister in history. She will also be remembered as a symptom of growing dysfunction within the Tory party, which is riven by divisions and differing visions of how to take the country forward.
I will say this because I know again, credit to the Wall Street Journal for doing this. However, problems with the Conservative Party only really started to be, like, the real divisions only really began in at least 2015, round about the time when calls about a European Union referendum were coming into circulation. And basically 9 years later, all the problems were coming to a head as well. From, again, Theresa May being stopped by Europe, to everything that Boris Johnson touched, to Liz Truss, and now with Rishi Sunak. I don't really have time to actually explain a lot of these because this is specifically about Liz Truss and, well, just her. But it would be interesting to know is then from the outright from the outset of, like, Americans, about if they're looking into this, about, well, how bad do you feel like this looks? I mean, is there, like, a president or a representative or a senator of state? Is there anybody who's had this? I mean, there probably is, but this is pretty embarrassing. I mean, it's probably one of the most humiliating examples I've ever seen, and, well, that's kind of really where this whole thing comes to an end. So there it is. That's Liz Truss's tenure as best as I can show it. Her book has been humiliated. She's humiliated because of her reputation. She looks as though she doesn't really know the word humiliation, and even the nation that is trying to, well, the Wall Street Journal is not really biting at Liz Truss because they know of her humiliation, of her very brief tenure because of her completely out of control ideologies and her expenditure, and, well, that's that. So that's hopefully that. Hopefully I never have to hear or speak or talk about Liz Truss ever again after this, because, well, I don't understand it. I don't understand what else there really is to do, what there is to say, apart from, well, Liz Truss also gets her pension and that for being Prime Minister. She could have served for literally 10 hours and she still would have got it. Doesn't really seem that fair in hindsight, does it? So, there you are. She lives the high life and also makes your life hell at the same time. She comes out as a winner, really, no matter what level of humiliation she goes through, or if the entire country literally turned on her. And I mean everybody in this country. So, it doesn't really seem that fair, really, looking back on it, and I don't think it is supposed to be fair. So, is there really anything we could learn from this? Is that, well, we deserve the vote no matter who or under what context the situation with government is. We should be allowed and to vote and to prevent things like this from ever happening again. It's not particularly small potatoes, but, well, we elected a lettuce. We didn't even do that. They elected a lettuce. I didn't have shit to do with this. So, there you are. A very sad end to this cycle of events because, well, there you are. The end.